Like to call a meeting to order. We have a lot on the agenda today, so let's get started. I'd like to welcome everybody and call on Amy to do the roll call.
Thank you, sir. For the roll call, who is with us from Bullitt County? Check online. How about Charlestown? Thank you for joining us, Toby. City of Jeffersontown? Hey, Matt. Bullitt County, just in time. Thanks for joining us, Steve. Anybody from City of Jeffersonville? New Albany? Shively. St. Matthews. Thank you. Clark County.
Brian Dixon's here.
Brian. Wood County.
Tim Kamer's on.
Hi, Nick.
And Tim.
Hi.
You guys.
Anyone from NDOT on the line today? I see at least one.
Carly Metcalf.
Hello, Carly. How about, who's next? Jefferson League of Cities, Jefferson County Cities. Nick Merritt. KYTC.
Yeah, Matt Bullock, District 5.
Tom Hall with District 5.
And Tom. Rural Metro Government.
A whole bunch of us here.
You did.
Frank Greenberg.
Thanks for joining us, man.
I'm Dirk Golan. Remotely, we've got Deputy Mayor Nicole George.
Amanda Dudridge.
Clay King.
Jeff O'Brien.
Thank you all for joining us. Anyone from the Airport Authority today? Oldham County. Judge Vogel's out on vacation perhaps this week. How about town of Clarksville? See Kevin.
Kevin Beatty.
Hello, Kevin. And last but not least, Tark. Gary's here. Thank you all for joining us today. For those online, just a reminder, in the new year, the voting members at least, we do ask that you keep your camera on during the vote so that we can have official business, official votes, etc. We appreciate your cooperation in that. And again, I'd like to extend a special welcome to Mayor Greenberg. Thank you so much for joining us. Hope look forward to working with you and your staff in the coming days and months and years. Thank you very much.
Likewise.
Thank you.
Okay, item number 2 on the agenda is the November meeting minutes. If everyone's had a chance to look at them, I'll entertain a motion. Second. We have a motion and a second to approve the minutes in November. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion passed. Item 3 is the public comment period. Greg?
Yes, we did not receive anything prior to the meeting starting, and I don't see anything in the Q&A from any members of the public.
Great, thanks. Sir. Public involvement report.
Sir,
Greg, again.
that is me. Okay, I was going to go through the public involvement report. This is actually going to cover November and December, which we did not have a December meeting. Social media numbers first and foremost. In November, Facebook numbers were solid, 5,000 impressions, 461 engagements. Did see a little bit of a drop in impressions in December, but the engagements actually went up. So that was good. That probably posed a little bit with our Amendment 9 campaign. And just with the holidays and stuff, it's not a surprise to see the impressions down. Twitter was the one we did see a little bit of a drop from, especially from November to December. I think that just is more, speaks on that platform of Twitter. Unfortunately, that is not something that is unique to KIPTA. That is everywhere. People are seeing quite a drop in impressions and engagements. That platform's a little bit unstable here for the last couple of months. So hopefully things get back a little rolling and we can see our numbers improve. Good news is, again, our numbers on Instagram went back up for another month. November went up as well as in December, so that is a solid sign that we're doing really good with our engagement on there. Website analytics, November, December did see a little bit of a drop, which is not a surprise with the, obviously with the holidays, but still good solid numbers across the board. MTP page did actually see a rise. As I said, public comment opportunity was Amendment 9 to our MTP and our TIF. We sent out an email campaign to over 1,800 folks, had 802 opens. That is a really good open to sent ratio that we don't normally get there. So that was good, plus a 221 link clicks. Social media campaign, 3,300 impressions, 517 engagements. That includes paid and organic. We went through, when we do our page, we kind of target certain demographics, certain areas, especially our environmental justice areas, to try to keep, make sure that their comments are heard. We did flyers published in all the MPO libraries as well as in the Business Association and Chamber newsletters. Held a virtual public meeting on January 4th. In total, we received 18 comments. We had 5 project likes. Most of the comments, they were not in favor of the projects that we did receive comments on. That included the I-64 project for the additional lanes as well as some I-71 additional lane work. Nick will actually get into that here in just a few minutes after I do. General public comments. So in December, we received 9 emails. They were all essentially asking for the same thing. They were requesting the Highway 864 and Campbell Street intersection be redesigned and converted from one-way to two-way. Several of our other planning partners were included on those emails. One email went into a little bit more detail. They asked for better signage at Swan and Kentucky, just stating that the bike paths are not real well listed there, that it's two-way. There's that you can go either way on those bike paths. And so they were asking for better signage. All emails, because I'm not going to go through them, we don't have that time, but they are included in the packet. They're going to go on the KIPTA website and our public participation page. So if anybody wants to review them, they can at that place. As I stated, several of our planning partners were included in those emails. KYTC District 5 actually released a response, just saying that they're identified as corridors for safety improvements and that the construction for the two-way, from one-way to two-way is going to begin this year and should be completed this year. They also submitted some information from Louisville Metro on there, as well as Mike King's information, and a link for two-way conversions. That wraps up my report unless anybody has any questions or comments.
Any questions for Greg? If not, we'll move on to item number 5. Proposed amendment 9 to the 2040 Metropolitan Transportation Plan and the 20 to 25 Transportation Improvement Plan. Nick?
Yes, thank you, Chair. This afternoon, kind of piggybacking on what Greg was just talking about for Amendment 9. For those who don't know, we have our long-range plan. It's Connecting Kentucky and 2040 Metropolitan Transportation Plan, and then our short-range kind of financial programming document is the fiscal year 2020 to 2025 TIP. We can make minor changes and add certain types of smaller non-region significant projects through our administrative modification process, but those that don't fit that, those criteria have to be added via amendments, and amendments require us at a minimum to go out to the public for a 15-day comment period. I'll be pretty brief here. All the details about all the projects are listed in the packet that was sent out. There are 9 total projects. In terms of the schedule, we started this process in early December, receiving project applications from sponsors, and this is kind of commingled with our development of our new long-range plan and TIP programming document. Staff reviewed those projects and sent the required information to the interagency consultation group. That group is made up of different federal, state, and local agencies, including Federal Highways, Federal Transit Administration, and EPA. We were required to pull together air quality conformity documentation because, there's a lot of nuance to this, but essentially there's a new air quality model, I guess it would be the right way to describe this, and we had to basically
And new budgets.
and new air quality budgets.
Air quality budgets, yes, sir.
So we had to do some quick analysis, and you'll see that detailed air quality conformity analysis towards the end of this packet. The public comment period ran from the 23rd of December to January 6th. So it hit our 15-day period that we're required to have. Those comments, as Greg mentioned, were sent to the Transportation Policy Committee on the 9th. On the 11th, I presented this amendment to the Transportation Technical Coordinating Committee, who approved or recommended TPC approval. So I am here to seek approval. Before I do that, just real quickly, I'll just kind of mention the projects that are included. There are 9. One was the NDOT's I-64 added travel lanes project. So there are proposed travel lanes being added to I-64 from US 150 to Spring Street, and also added lanes on I-265 from I-64 to State Street, and also improvements of the interchanges there. In addition to that, there's a lot of maintenance projects in here. There's a NDOT maintenance project on I-64. There's another kind of interchange improvement project that NDOT is going to pursue on I-65 and Veterans Parkway exit there. And then there's a new intersection improvement at State Route 60 and Perry Crossing Road, adding some turn lane or turn bays. And then KYTC is removing a bridge project that included 3 bridges because they're separating those bridges out into individual projects. So you will see the removal of I-65 bridge project, and then you will see the addition of bridge improvement projects at Hill, Burnett, East Kentucky, and the P&L Railway off I-264, which is a little bit of a separate project. And then finally, there was a new project for some maintenance on I-71 in Oldham County. Those are the 9 projects. I can take any comments or questions at this point in time. If not, the action is to approve Amendment 9 to the MTP and TIP.
Do I hear a motion?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, Chair. There's 2 signs, so I can put those after the meeting. Thank you.
Item number 6, Transportation Technical Coordinating Committee Officer, Andy.
Sir, so at our meeting on January 11th, the Transportation Technical Coordinating Committee in this room, we needed to nominate and elect new officers to that committee. Mr. Keith Griffey was our outgoing chairperson, and our bylaws say that you're only allowed to be our chairperson for 2 years. And so he served 2 great years on the TTCC. So I want to thank Keith Griffey from Bullitt County for his service once again in front of this group. As for the new year for 2023, our vice chairperson is going to be Ida Kopit from TARC. She's the Director of Division of Planning. You know that, right, Karen?
Yes.
Director of Division of Planning. And then Matt Meunier from City of Jeffersontown, where I can barely see you, Matt. So look forward to working with Matt and Aida. They are longtime active members on that committee and this one for that matter. And we look forward for a good year to come on the TTCC. So the action being requested is to approve those officers for our 2023 TTCC.
Motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? Everybody in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Metropolitan Transportation Finance Plan, Spencer and Alex.
afternoon, everybody. So Spencer is going to go over the finance plan for the MTP, but since we have new faces with this addition of the TPC, we thought it'd be good to first just do a quick reset of what exactly we're talking about when we discuss the MTP, connecting Kentuckiana 2050, the almost complete update to the region's long-range transportation plan. So I will go over that briefly for anybody here or Zoom would like sort of the long and gory details. I'm happy to sit down for as much time as it takes at your convenience. Just please let us know. But briefly for today, I wanted to highlight a few things just to make sure everybody's caught up. So federal regulation says that each urbanized area like KIPTA must carry out a continuing, cooperative, and comprehensive performance-based multimodal transportation planning process. One of the most important requirements of that is the MTP, the long-range plan, and that identifies regionally significant projects and priorities for at least the next 20 years. And beyond simply complying with the federal requirement, this is important because it helps the region to identify big picture priorities and outlines what should be the most important funding priorities in the years to come. The plan is updated roughly on a 4-year cycle with opportunities for amendments throughout, as Nick had just discussed from the previous plan. And KIPTA has spent much of the last few years laying the groundwork for this update, working with the TPC to set goals, performance measures, and performing various analyses, engaging the community and stakeholders around priorities. So starting this summer, the process really began to pick up. From August until October, we had an open submission process where each jurisdiction in the region had the opportunity to submit projects for consideration, as well as each participating agency. Since then, staff has been examining each project, asking questions where we need to, and generally preparing the updated document. And we are now in the home stretch of that process. Over the next month to 2 months, we will complete the bulk of this. The TTCC will receive a draft list of all projects before the February meeting. And then our goal is to have a draft of the entire plan, project and analysis ready for approval at either the February or the March TPC. We've got a few things we need to figure out over the next week ahead of TTCC, and we'll be able to really narrow that deadline down by then. This will put us in position to have the public comment and response period open for 45 days, and then come back to TPC for final approval in April or May, and then final federal approval by July 1st. At this point in the process, one of the last remaining tasks for this body before actually taking on the full plan is to certify that the updated plan is financially reasonable. And for that, I will turn it over to you, Spencer.
Thanks, Alex. My name is Spencer Williams, the transportation planner with KIPTA, and I'm going to present to you guys the Connecting Kentuckiana 2050 financial plan update. So here we go. Why do we need a financial plan? So federal regulation says long-range plans must be financially reasonable, like the MTP. Financially reasonable in this case means that we are within 10% plus or minus of our anticipated resources by 2050. So the project cost, the balance of the project cost subtracted from the anticipated resources is within that 10%. We calculate this separately for Indiana and Kentucky, and we are going to look on a 26-year horizon from 2024 to 2050. There's a little diagram. So there you see like the anticipated resources that we'll have calculated minus the anticipated project cost, and new project costs will equal the balance that remains. And if it's within that 10%, then we're considered financially reasonable. So anticipated resources. Per the Metropolitan Transportation Planning Memorandum of Agreement, or the Planning MOA, between KIPTA, TARC, KYTC, and NDOT, we use previous annual elements of the Transportation Improvement Program, the TIP, to identify an average annual dollar amount based on what's been programmed in the TIP for any given annual element. We do this separately for Kentucky and Indiana, and we use a formula that assumes 5% inflation compounded annually to determine the total amount of resources that the Umatilla region will receive through 2050. So in Indiana, by 2050, the anticipated funding resources is $3,071 million, and in Kentucky, it's $9,853 million. These anticipated resources are not considered a commitment of funds, but are a planning number essentially. Just how we got the estimated costs. There are two ways we got this. The first one was to add up the total project cost for each project or line item in the KIT to MTP and to make sure that there is year of expenditure dollars. And the other way is that we estimate based upon prior spending and adjusted for inflation, the total group project cost for every year after the current TIP through 2050. Just a real quick reminder for anybody that's new in the room, or if you just need a quick refresher, what a group project is. A group project is a project that meets the guidelines and criteria for being a group project. They're not listed individually in Connecting Kentuckiana 2050, but they're considered included in the MTP through their group project status. The three main things that qualify a project for being a group project are they're air quality exempt, the total cost is at or below each category's defined limit, and they contribute to the intent of each of the categories. And there's the 8 categories right there. All right, so here are the anticipated project cost and the anticipated group project category cost. The anticipated project cost in Indiana are $1,145 million, and in Kentucky they are $7,796 million. And in Indiana for group projects, they are $1,631 million, and in Kentucky they are $2,044 million. And you'll notice that the group project costs are very large, and in Indiana that the cost of the group project is actually higher than the anticipated project cost above, and that's due to maintenance costs. One of the group project categories is road and bridge maintenance, and that category is by far the largest total dollar amount of all the group projects. So here's the final balance. You'll notice in your packet, there was a link also for the people that are online. You have all this chart in front of you, but the anticipated funding resources minus the anticipated project cost and group project cost shows that the remaining anticipated balance in Indiana is $295 million, which is 9.6% over the anticipated funding resources in 2050, and Kentucky is $13 million, which is 0.13% of the anticipated funding resources in Kentucky. That is within that plus or minus 10% margin, so that our MTP and the financial plan that are part of it is considered financially reasonable. Action is requested recommend that TPC adopt the Connecting Kentuckiana 2050 financial plan for the upcoming MTP update. And I will also note that TTCC a few weeks ago recommended approval by TPC of this financial plan.
Motion to adopt the 2025 financial plan.
Second.
And second. Any questions from anybody? Spencer?
I just have one question. If you said this, I apologize. The anticipated funding resources, are those based on essentially the bipartisan infrastructure law and the transportation authorization bill?
Most of it is historical data, so we take the projects that were in the TIP for the last 10 years, and we created an average annual amount. And so using that average annual amount, so it would include some of the bipartisan infrastructure law.
Yeah, it was probably trickier than usual for that exact reason, meaning we want to look back far enough, but if the last year or two are way up here, and then, we're on this level, now we're on this level. So hopefully what do we end up using, like 17 through 22, 17 through 23?
Yeah, 17 to 23.
Yeah, so.
Just to note that the MOA specifically says we need to look backwards at the tip for calculating this.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, that's good. It just, I understand why in prior years you would look back, but this year, for this set of years, looking to the future would actually be more advantageous for getting projects moved along.
The 5% inflation rate wasn't necessarily a chosen one. That was one that's been pre-established and has precedent, frankly. And so what's that mean? Over the last 2 years, it's been
Right.
50% inflation or something like that. And that can't go on forever, we know that. But is 5 high, is 5 low? Right now, a few years ago, we said 5's pretty aggressive, pretty high.
Yeah.
Now we don't say that, not even a little bit.
Okay, I thank you.
Any other questions?
Okay, we've had a motion and a second. All in favor of adopting? Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next item, regional transportation planning MOA. Andy.
Sir, in your packet, you will see an electronically signed copy of what's known as the Planning Memorandum of Agreement. This is a document that all NPOs must have. This is the document that we heard about in our recent federal certification review for the new ones in the room last summer. Federal Highway Administration, Federal Transit Administration, EPA, Environmental Protection Agency. They came to KIPTA to certify that we are doing what we're supposed to be doing in terms of the metropolitan planning process. One of the corrective actions we received at that time was to take a look at our planning MOA, and they didn't say there's anything wrong with it necessarily, but they said this. They said that it references the old highway bills, as they used to be called, the old Transportation Act. And so they said, why don't you take that out of your MOA, please? And so we have. And so I mentioned at our November meeting of this body that we would be circulating that MOA for signatures. And again, this is simply an agreement between just 4 agencies, that is KIPTA, NDOT, KYTC, and Park. And we did receive those signatures from leadership at those places and from legal counsels, and otherwise, and perhaps I should have finished what I was saying before. The changes were extremely minor, negligible, other than removal of safety lou and FAST Act, the old Transportation Act.
You can go all the way back to ICE-T.
I don't think it did. It went back. I think it went back to at least safety lou. Yeah, we had multiple ones in there because I guess we kept stacking them. And they said, here's what they said. They said, take them out so that you don't have to update this thing very often, right? Take them out so that when it's 5 years from now, this thing's going to still be sound when there's a new act that's not the bill IIJA. So those we do need to submit that to our friends at NDOT and KYTC. And so the action being requested is this body's approval or ratification of that, so for us to send that on to staff to those agencies.
Okay, do I hear a motion? Second?
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Carries.
Thank you very much.
Next item is FRA Amtrak discussion. Andy.
Thank you again. This one's kind of an interesting one. Speaking of our IIJA and bipartisan infrastructure law, there is a substantial amount of money put in there for passenger and freight rail to the tune of about $66 billion over a 5-year period. 18 billion of that is for new Amtrak or FRA Amtrak corridors, new passenger rail corridors. What's very interesting about this is that Amtrak has seemingly signaled interest in returning service again to Louisville. Okay, as many of y'all know, there was service. It probably ended about 20 years ago, let's say, that connected Louisville to Chicago. Okay, and what Amtrak has expressed an interest. Perhaps when they went to Congress to seek that $66 billion, they presented a map that probably looked just like this. This is the map that we've seen from Amtrak, and you can find it on their website. But interestingly, on that map, you see that connection reestablished between Louisville and Indianapolis, not only to Louisville and Indianapolis, but to Louisville to Chicago. So this is Amtrak's interest in us, not our interest necessarily to Amtrak. And so that's very interesting. That's pretty compelling, if you ask me. So I wanted to put this map up here. I think that's important perspective. So what's going on now, among other things, is just like a lot of late breaking news is they've made a discretionary grant program, and they put that discretionary grant program out there. It was announced, I think, back in December. And it has a long name there, Federal State Partnership for Intercity Passenger Rail Grant Program. Mike, did I have that right?
You nailed it.
All right. It's about $2 billion. And probably one of the best things on this slide is this idea that those $2.3 billion are multifaceted. One of the things you can do with them is to do a planning grant. A planning grant up to, I think, $500,000. Planning grant that would be 100% federally funded with no local match required, and a planning grant that would just assess the viability, that would say, hey, it might cost about this much to improve the rails, to buy train sets, to do signals, to operate the service between these places, whatever places, not necessarily Louisville to Indianapolis, Louisville to Nashville, Louisville to elsewhere. And so the planning grant, once again, is 100% federally funded, okay? The other grants or the other components of, I guess, this grant program would require a local match. It's very important. I think the capital was, if I'm not mistaken, was like 80% federal, 20% local or state funded. That's traditional for most programs. But for the operating loss or the operating subsidy, whatever you want to call it, I think it stair steps down, starts at 90, and over a period of maybe 7 years, it increases. We couldn't do this on our own. We have no intention of doing this on our own at KIPTA or even Louisville Metro. It's obvious it's going to take 2 states at least. It's going to take 2 cities, probably many cities at least. And it's pretty clear to us, it's going to take multiple MPOs to coordinate this effort if we want to jump in this game. That last part's due by March 7th. So there are conversations between KIPTA, Louisville Metro, KIPTA, and our friends at the Indianapolis MPO. We've started preliminary discussions with them to see what they might be interested in. Also, let's see, the Columbus, Indiana MPO would presumably be involved in that as well. So a couple other things. I don't want to get too far in depth because a lot of the questions we just don't have the answers to here. Could this planning grant can make other connections? Again, I just mentioned that Louisville to Nashville. To me, that map, you can go back to that, Greg. There's a gap right there. Wouldn't it be interesting to connect Louisville to Nashville? And then before you know it, you've got an Atlanta to Chicago line that Louisville would be pretty prominent on. That'd be pretty fascinating. And it would be passenger rail in Kentucky. The connection to Indianapolis would be passenger rail in Indiana and presumably to a station in downtown Louisville, presumably. Okay, so go here. What this always is going to require, and it might be ticklish, is cooperation with the freight railroad companies. The Louisville to Indianapolis connection is the Louisville and Indiana Railroad. So cooperation directly with that railroad company is going to be a factor. If I'm not mistaken, CSX has some level of, I think they call it trackage rights to operate on that railroad. So it'd be dealing probably with CSX as well. This idea about eligibility or legality of state support. It's my understanding, and I'm no legal expert, but I've been told that there's issues in Kentucky with funding passenger rail. State law may not allow passenger rail subsidies to be paid for in Kentucky. So that's just something for consideration. We don't need to get too far into that now. So that could be an interesting thing for Kentucky to consider maybe in the future. And last but not least, if the route is 750 or more miles, state support isn't necessarily required. If the route goes that long, then it's just an Amtrak route. That's our understanding. And so there's this thing called an FRA long distance service study. I think I have that right. That's ongoing right now. That's an Amtrak or an FRA study that KIPTA is a part of. Invited Mike to be my +1 on that journey on that one. But what KIPTA is a part of, and Metro is too, they're having 2 meetings next week and week after next. A Southeast meeting and a Midwest meeting. Just like usual, we're right in the middle and we're in two regions. And so we'll be participating in that to see where those long distance routes might go. It might not require state support. That's the most important thing in my view. It might not require state support if Louisville is on one of those new long distance routes. I checked, Atlanta to Chicago is shorter than 750 miles. If it was, that'd be the perfect one, but it's shorter than that, 650. It's close, maybe change it. There's a website for those online.
I mean, Atlanta to Milwaukee.
Atlanta to Milwaukee, New Orleans to somewhere, yeah, that's right, that's right. So a lot of uncertainty, a lot of unknowns. I don't want to get anybody's hopes up. I did want to bring that in front of this body to get your all's feedback, if there is any. It's probably an ongoing feedback. Probably in February, we'll have to either make that determination if we are going to jump in to that grant process, just to test the viability of it, and say, you know, it's no cost to Kipton, no cost to Louisville, no cost to Columbus, no cost to Indianapolis to study it. If that's something that you guys would like us to pursue, that's something that we have some desire to pursue, especially if Metro and others would like us to do so. So that's all I have, just informational purposes only. Happy to answer any questions I can answer, but look forward to continuing this conversation. Yes, sir.
You know, to me, going south is exciting than going north.
Me too.
To connect you guys. And I definitely think in order to be involved in the study and kind of direct the train and where we want it to go.
One thing I failed to mention, speaking on what's attractive and what's not, Amtrak recognizes the service that used to be here was bad. It took 10 hours or whatever to get to Chicago, so nobody took it. They're saying this has to be car competitive, I think is the word they said. And the service they envision, and in fact, the Amtrak representative was on the Indiana Appeal Council just this morning, so I heard this presentation once again from him, is what they've envisioned is 8 round trips a day coming from Chicago to Indianapolis. 4 of those trips would continue to Louisville, while the other 4 would go to Cincinnati. So that's good service. That's real good service. That line that goes from Charleston, West Virginia, or wherever that is, somewhere in West Virginia, through Ashland, through Cincinnati, on up to Chicago. That's like, I think they call that the Cardinal route, if I'm not mistaken. That, I don't even think that's an everyday route. That's like 4 days a week route or something like that. So they know, Amtrak knows, and when they ask Congress for money, know that these routes that serve rural America isn't exactly what might work best. And they want real good service, real fast service. Trains going, 75 plus miles per hour. I think 79 is the target speed, 79 or 90. And so they said, I think it's a 4 or 5. I think they said they envision a 5-hour trip Louisville to Chicago, and that's very much car competitive, certainly. Yes, sir.
So first of all, I strongly support, I think on behalf of Metro, participating in the study. It would be amazing if we got Amtrak along the quality that you described and that back to Louisville. Is the process, does KIPTA make that application? I think we should definitely apply.
That's gonna be a tricky part. That very much is, because we can't do it alone. We need KIPTA, Metro, probably Indianapolis and Indianapolis MPO, our counterpart agency up there. NDOT has signaled, if I'm not mistaken, I know we don't have an NDOT freight person on the line. NDOT, I think, has signaled that their first priority is Chicago to Indianapolis. And I think second of the 3, I suppose, I think there's actually a 4th one, by the way, Columbus through Fort Wayne to Chicago, that NDOT would like to see. But the second priority, as I understand it, is the Indianapolis line. So that is something that I hope we can partner with, and if that's certainly
Yeah, we
something
can talk
that the city
back
wants to do.
calling the mayor of Indianapolis, who I know well, is helpful or something like that. Just let us know, but we'd like to do everything we can to help
Okay.
at least apply.
Yeah, so to answer your question, it'd be a multi-MPO, presumably it'd be a multi-MPO, multi-city, multi-state perhaps application.
Got it.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, you're welcome.
It goes without saying, TARC is supportive in whatever way we can, and I think our familiarity with bi-state operations, I think we would also be happy to be a partner.
Sure.
And I agree with you, Mayor, is that the southern connection to Nashville, I think, is equally important, and maybe what we need to keep sort of in the mix, because that's more important probably for Kentucky as a state than just Kentucky to Indiana, but definitely supportive. I know we've talked about this many times, so I won't belabor my support.
What's fun to envision is where might the new station be? Where might the downtown Louisville station be?
What's the Amtrak station,
That'd
we're
be
still
pretty,
supportive.
that'd be pretty cool down. So
Get it back.
it's way down on. So, yeah, I just want to bring that. One thing that the FRA Government Affairs representative did say, he's happy to come and talk to committees and like us. And so if that's something that this committee would like to see, I'll certainly be willing to invite him to upcoming maybe next month perhaps, if that's something that, you know, there's support for. So that's all I have, unless there's other questions.
No action.
No action is requested.
No action, even,
Nope.
even if we want to pursue it at the
Sure.
next meeting.
That would be appropriate. That'd be appropriate. Yes.
Is everybody in favor of that? Having someone come and do this at the next meeting?
Okay.
Do you need a motion for that, Mayor?
I think we should, if we want to put it in the minutes and that, so.
Make a motion.
Perfect. Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried, whatever.
All right, I'll see what I can do. See what I can do. Probably be remote, but if he can come and join us,
Well, that'd be
even better,
that'd be good.
even better.
The next item has been scratched. I will let Andy explain why, just because it was on the agenda.
It was on the agenda. I learned just yesterday, late yesterday or first this morning, that KYTC no longer is going to pursue a raised grant for a project that would actually be a joining of 3 existing KIPTA MTP projects on Kentucky 1931, which is Greenwood Road in the vicinity of PRP High over Dixie Highway, and then continuing on the same road, new name, St. Andrews Church Road, which goes east of Dixie over toward Doss High School, toward Palatka Road. They were planning to pursue a raised grant on this round of funding. I learned just yesterday that they no longer want to pursue that raised grant, but these projects are still priorities of theirs and hope to make some moves on these before too long. So that's all I have for that.
All right, thank you, Andy. Number 11, Metropolitan Planning Organization Dedicated Funding Program. Nick, again.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I've got a brief presentation. This item is a quarterly item that I bring to TPC to provide an update on how things are going with the management of MPO dedicated projects in both Kentucky and Indiana. We receive funds from NDOT for 6 programs now and 3 programs in Kentucky. And there are kind of rules and requirements on how those projects have to be managed, how cost increases are handled, project delays, and other things. So this is just kind of a once a quarter update on how things are shaking out in both states, and then I'll give a brief update on how things are going with the current call for projects. So in Indiana, right now you see just the 5 programs. We were recently made aware of the PROTECT program, which is all about promoting resiliency in transportation. A lot of it having to do with maintenance and ensuring that projects are built to a standard to withstand significant weather events. At this point in time, fiscal year 23 is starting to wind down. In Indiana, the federal programs operate on a July to June fiscal year. Under the carbon reduction program, we're still waiting for those funds to be obligated. In the congestion mitigation air quality program, those are the funds that Louisville Metro Air Pollution Control District receives for the CARE program, the education program. Those funds are typically obligated at the beginning of the fiscal year. Highway Safety Improvement Program, we do have $800,000 program for a project in Clark County for a roundabout at Kentucky Road 403 and Stacy Road, and they are moving forward on the utilities work as part of that project, but are not quite ready. And to be clear, some of that money may come back to the region. And there was a previous TPC decision, I think back in November, for an award of some cost increase funds with a contingency that if those funds are de-obligated, we already have a plan in place to obligate those quickly. Surface Transportation Block Grant Program, there's been obligation of the funds for a small amount of funds that KIPTA's regional rideshare program, Every Commute Counts, receives, as well as some other program funding. And then there is a Transportation Alternatives Project in Clarksville and Jeffersonville that comprises the bulk of, or the 100% of those transportation alternatives funds. I did hear, unfortunately, earlier this week that the bids for that project came back more than 20% higher than the cost estimate. So they're going to have to Reed left that project, we did that project. So I've actually got a meeting this afternoon to see how that's going to pan out. That's important because in Indiana, it's a use it or lose it system. And so if something were to happen where we couldn't award funds to that project, we would need to find a home very quickly for that $688,000. It wouldn't necessarily be easy because it would have to be bike and pedestrian focused. So I'll keep monitoring that, that project. In Kentucky, the federal programs operate on a fiscal year from October to September. So we're just not even midway through the year. I've listed the carbon reduction program. That's a new program that hadn't been, or that came about as part of the IIJA bill act, the transportation authorization bill. So we have a current call for projects to consider award of funds through that program. And so more information will be provided probably in the next month or so to this body. Surface Transportation Block Grant Program, that's the largest of the three programs that we receive. We typically receive about 24 million annually. There's been an obligation of about $1.7 million so far. Started out with 88 million, and that's definitely aspirational in terms of achieving that amount. In the Transportation Alternatives Program, 3.3 has been obligated, or 3.3 has been programmed. 740,000 was obligated actually for the construction of Patty Lane. So it's always nice to see projects go into construction, and that's one example there. I've mentioned those obligation targets on the right. We are allowed to carry over funds in Kentucky, and as you can see by the balances in the two programs, we are carrying over essentially 3 years worth of funding at this time. And so in order to ensure we're not adding to that carryover balance, we need to try to work, and I know everybody works as hard as they can on project management, and but the goal I think is at a minimum $24 million. Of course, if a project like River Road is obligated, that's $20+ million immediately that hits. So hopefully this turns out to be a big year for the region and cutting down that carryover balance, but more importantly, getting projects to the construction phase so that the public can see the fruits of everyone's labor. That's all I have on the obligation status. Does anyone have any questions about obligations in Indiana and Kentucky this fiscal year? Okay. So I have a couple more slides about the call for projects. So the call for projects was announced back in the summer. Project applications were due by the end of October. We extended that deadline a week or so. There was some confusion about some application requirements. Since that time, not sure. There you go. Okay. There's the quarterly obligations, two notable ones. The New Albany State Street project moving forward with a planning study. And then again, that Patty Lane improvement project for sidewalks on Patty Lane. But moving into the call for projects. So like I said, projects were due at the end of October. Staff spent November and December evaluating those projects, running them through our new ArcGIS evaluation model. That's really going to help to kind of automate a lot of that. And we are now in the working group stage. So the way our project management guidebook sets this up is that a working group reviews all the projects and tries to come to an agreement on a funding recommendation that I can then bring to TTCC and TPC. The group met yesterday for our first meeting. There's another meeting scheduled for Tuesday. These are always difficult decisions. As you can see in Indiana, we received 11 projects from 5 sponsors. One of those projects has, as of yesterday, Clarksville kind of rescinded a project from consideration. So we've got about $24 million in requests now for $21 million that we have available. So we can fund most of the projects, and we'll give you more information about that next month. In Kentucky, we had a number of existing projects that needed additional funding for future phases, as well as some transportation alternatives projects that are requesting cost increases. Those represent about $30 million in costs, and we only have about $80 million available. And so if we cover all of those, that leaves $50 million for new Kentucky projects. We're also trying to make sure that other existing projects have identifiable funding sources as well. But at the end of the day, we received 29 new projects totaling $111 million. While we say we have $80 million, if we fund those 30 million in existing projects, we're really left with 50. So there's going to be some hard decisions that will have to be made. A lot of that work was already started yesterday, and next Tuesday we'll have our follow-up meeting. And hopefully everything goes well and we're able to bring funding recommendations to you next month. Does anyone have any questions or comments about the call?
George had one
Yeah.
question.
Yeah, Deputy Mayor George says, how can we increase our ability to obligate funds? Want to take a crack?
I would say it's a very complicated process. There's a number of, I think, issues. I think a lot of times there's issues with utility coordination. So I think improving coordination with utility companies is, I think, definitely something that's been on everyone's radar that I've heard anecdotally from sponsors from KYTC as well, working with LG&Es and those folks. I think, good design, early design work, just timely project management. I don't pretend to be one of the folks that is project manager. And so it's definitely complicated, but it's got in itself, it's all wrapped up in the federal requirements, the state requirements, and bidding processes. One thing that's obviously exploded is the inflation and the materials costs, and construction phases are ballooning 30 and 40 and sometimes 50% higher than they were probably a year ago. But it's definitely something we've had a lot of talks about. If anyone in this room wants to chime in on things that folks can do to improve the management of projects, I'm glad to hear it. But I would say utility coordination is something we hear pretty consistently that impacts the delays with projects.
I was just gonna add or sort of say for consideration, I wonder if it would be helpful to have some conversations or even sort of an open meeting with, like construction companies or other, not consultants, because I think some of the planning work is done, but even the construction teams, because what we have seen some success with in prior years is putting projects together, not group projects from the earlier discussion, but we do a lot of smaller sidewalk, bus shelter, but putting them together gives sort of a bigger project for a construction company. They could also maybe limit some of their mobilization cost if it was like they knew they were going to do this work, then this work. So that might be something that we could hear from construction companies of like, if we packaged it this way, would that be better? What are things that could be more advantageous to get things done? Just a thought.
As Nick said, we're not the experts here. KIP did project implementation, help pretty good about project planning. But one of the things we did do, middle all last year, we reached out about this utility issue and tried to see what we can discover. What can we do at KIP? What can we do in a tip?
Utilities are super well known.
But the preaching to the choir here, the utilities are way too often, in the public right of way, in the public transportation right of way. And so that's a tricky thing. Whose dime is it, who pays for it? And it's not always the same circumstance, where it depends where you're moving it, how far you're moving it. And certainly, I think we can say, and I know I'm preaching to the choir once again, but it would be nice if this type of move, that utility move, that they need to be relocated, they got higher up the totem pole, higher up the chain on what LG&E and their counterpart agencies desire to do and what's on their priority list. I think, but we can't force that, man, not well. Perhaps through some pressure from Frankfurt or something like that, because they are using the public right of way way too often, or not way too often as in too much, but it's almost always the case is what I mean by that. So there's no good answer to this, and the inflation is just a giant headwind as well. There's no denying that, no denying that. For the project that Nick was just mentioning, the projects just have to go out to be relet because of cost estimates that aren't old. They're not old cost estimates that we're way under. They're just cost estimates that were done in hyperinflation times.
They're not gonna get it within 20% of that estimate though. That, everything I'm seeing is 30 to, well, if it's signal work, it's 100% increase. The electrical is out the roof. Yeah, electrical is, yeah, like the traffic signals with one-way to two-way, streetlights. That's why I've got a lot of cost increases in request. It's a hard time to do business. And
I didn't have any action or anything on that, but if there's other questions or comments, I'm happy to take those as well.
Any more questions? Seems you're free now.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Next item, active transportation plan. Alex.
Thank you, Chair. Just a real quick update for TTC, that KIPA is beginning the planning process for the region's active transportation plan within the next week, actually. Active transportation, basically walking or biking as a mode of travel. And our active transportation plan is intended to serve as a resource for local governments and agencies within the region to identify strengths and gaps in ped bike infrastructure, provide best practice resources for local agencies, and assist in the prioritization for future projects. This is a companion piece to the Complete Streets policy that was passed in August that's used to help prioritize awards of funding controlled by the NPO. And this process we anticipate will be through a good chunk of 2023, hopefully wrapping up in the fall, but we'll have a bigger, more accurate update soon on that. The process is going to be guided by a steering committee made up of TTCC members. And that first meeting is going to be next Friday, February the 3rd. So I just wanted to thank Aida from TARC, Matt Muniak from J-Town, Chad Reisel from Jeffersonville, and then Nathan Kelch, I'm going to get it right, excellent, from Louisville Metro, who have all pledged to serve on that. And we will have a update in the coming months. I think I'm next, so I can stay right up here.
You can stay right up there.
If you have any questions, I'm happy to take on the active transportation plan.
Okay, we'll move right on to the next one, Safe Street.
Cool. Again, just a quick update on the Safe Streets for All planning process. So for, again, our new folks on the call, the Safe Streets and Roads for All is a new US DOT discretionary funding program aimed at reducing fatal and serious roadway crashes. On behalf of the region, KIPTA applied in early fall to funds to complete a regional action plan and local jurisdiction action plan for participating jurisdictions. 16 jurisdictions signed on for that, and we expect to find out, well, they said late January, it now says, as Amanda and I were talking about, early 2023 for the response back from US DOT on that. As of 11:37 a.m., last time I checked, we have not seen any response yet. So hopefully when we come back in February, we'll be able to say, one way or the other where that's at. And we will hopefully be able to move forward very quickly if the news is good. But that's the update that I have. Chair, happy to answer any questions. No action needed right now.
Any questions? Thanks, sir.
Thank you all.
Next item is administrative modification 41 to the 2025 transportation improvement program.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. We just have two projects included in administrative modification 41. We are still making modifications to our existing TIP, although we kind of prefer not to, but we've told we're not going to hold any projects back from moving forward. KYTC had a new project that they wanted to pursue and add to the TIP. That is the installation of wrong way driving signage and pavement markers on off ramps in and around Jefferson County. Obviously a great safety project. It fits within the group project cost thresholds for safety improvement project, which is $2 million. So this project is being added to the tip, and we're able to do that as part of our group project policy. And then there's a revision to an existing project in Clark County for Clark County Bridge 413. And that is a request from NDOT to revise that project description and build essentially one and the same maintenance and rehabilitation of that bridge. Those are the only projects included in Administrative Modification 41. No action is required. This is for informational purposes only, but I can take any comments or questions.
Any questions for Nick? Thank you, Terry.
You all.
Next item, 2023 Transportation Committee Officers. Andy.
Thank you, sir. As many of you that were here at our last meeting, noticed that our new chairperson is Bernie Bowling. And so Bernie Bowling has been gracious enough to volunteer his time to be our chairperson. You may say, why didn't we do an election? Well, because the KIPTA TPC bylaws state that the highest ranking officer on the KIPTA Board of Directors, Executive Committee that's in the MPO area has the right of first refusal to this position. So Bernie Bowling is that this year as the board vice chair. And so we appreciate his service this year. Our bylaws say another thing. They say that at the first meeting of the calendar year, we need to nominate and elect a vice chairperson. And so that's what we need to do right here. And I would either turn this back over to you, Bernie, or I can, if you think it's appropriate to administer that, or I can do it myself. It doesn't matter to me.
Well, either way, the Mayor Chapman has been recommended to be the vice chair. And unless we hear someone.
Should we open it up for nominations, other nominations? How about we do that? So how about we open up for nominations, first of all? And I hear one name on the table, I do. Anybody would like to formally make that nomination, or was it just Nate perhaps?
I'll make a motion to nominate Mayor Chapman.
I'd second that. I'll make a motion to close all nominations.
Second that.
All right,
Okay, we have a motion.
Let's
and a
just second
second.
check.
Yeah. I guess we need an election.
For Mayor Chapman to be the vice chair of the Transportation Policy Committee. All in favor? Any opposed? Looks like the motion carries. Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you, Mark.
Next item, other business, Andy.
Yes, I've got a few things on other business. We've got, as you saw on the agenda, we got 17 agenda items. I've got 6 on other business. I think that both of those are unprecedented. So I will go as quick as I can. First, you know how I just spoke about the RAISE grant that KYTC no longer wants to pursue. I have in my hands a one pager that I just received yesterday from NDOT. NDOT is going to pursue RAISE grant funding for a project in Sellersburg on US 31. And so that was good for us to see, in part because that was part of the Clark County Thoroughfare Study that was a KIPTA administered process not too many years ago. And so NDOT has asked for a letter of support, and I hope that you guys would not object for me writing that letter of support and sending that on in support of NDOT in this project. Okay, so that's agenda other business number 1. Secondly, I would like to recognize in front of the TPC, Ms. Valerie Moore. This is going to be her last TPC meeting as a KIPTA staff member. Valerie is moving on to the private sector. Tomorrow is her last day at KIPTA, so I wanted to recognize Valerie in front of this group. So thank you, Valerie.
It's been an honor.
Thank you very much. And while we are recognizing folks, I would like to recognize our outgoing chair and vice chair from last year. And so we've got a token of our appreciation. Nobody's here from Oldham County, so we'll go with our vice chair, Ms. Terry Butler from TARC. We've got a token of our appreciation.
What is it?
Well, what could it be? What could it be?
That is very unexpected.
So,
Now, is this the new thing to use for the gavel?
we got one from Judge Vogel down here too. So Terry handled the chairperson role so many times last year. Judge Vogel was otherwise occupied. So we appreciate both of your support to KIPTA and to the TPC in particular. So thank you so much for that. Halfway done. Fourth, For those agencies that receive PL funds for planning studies and whatnot, that's Metro, that's Clarksville, that's Floyd County, that's a couple others. One of the things I want to remind you guys that most of those dollars, if not all those dollars, need to be spent, or those activities need to be completed by June 30th, by the end of the fiscal year. We talked about that planning MOA. What several agencies in the room have received is our air quality conformity MOU, memorandum of understanding. That's the air quality conformity documentation. That's the procedural thing there. That is out for comments. Those comments, Randy Simon reminded me those comments are due by January 31st. So if you have any comments on those, please get those to us pretty soon. And last but not least, probably least in this one, because I don't want to get too far into it. At TTCC, there's robust conversation about the census defined urbanized area boundary and how much that can, and what may perhaps likely will, impact our funding levels here as the MPO. We don't have all the answers to those questions yet, but I do encourage the people that weren't there at TTCC, that had staff there, reach out to them. Chris Nicholas, I think she's going to be coordinating those efforts on our behalf here at KIPTA. I expect to have a presentation from her probably each month in the next few months, because as this dust continues to settle, for those that don't know, the urbanized areas were announced on December 29th. The census is about a year behind. We finally got on December 29th of last year, 2022. We don't officially have the maps yet, but what has happened is the Louisville urbanized area has shrunk by 16%. The land area has shrunk by 16%. That's something else.
Because the population is now attributed to other urbanized areas, we didn't shrink the geographics.
Well, kind of. Here's
Okay.
why. It's multifaceted. Yes, we have a unique case where the Mount Washington urbanized area has been sliced off and parted out, if you will. And so Mount Washington is now its own urbanized area.
Okay.
And the same thing is true about LaGrange, okay? LaGrange was its own until 20 or 30 years ago, and then it got consumed by the Louisville urbanized area. And then Mount Washington has just grown so much lately that it never was its own, if I'm not mistaken. Now it's that's kind of wild that they're their own things, because that means that the Louisville area has shrunk. We don't have that 46,000 population that is in those two urbanized areas. Therefore, we probably get $46,000 people's worth fewer dollars. But around the rest of the region, it has shrunk also. Okay, so they changed the density criteria, first and foremost. And so there is, on the census Tiger Web map, there is what appears to be an unofficial or a leaked map or whatever you want to call it. And it does show what the urbanized area boundaries appear to be. And it looks like we shrunk in all 5 counties, let's put it that way. All 7 counties. Shelby County is barely, maybe 1 census block where it used to be 4 square miles. Harrison County, Indiana. We always come to this committee when we talk about our map. We said there's 0.1 square miles of Harrison County, Indiana in the urbanized area. That's not true anymore. It would not appear. So for that matter, the urbanized area boundary in that direction ceases at Floyd Knobs, right? There's a physical boundary there. And so where some of the growth boundary has occurred. So again, TTCC each month through the spring, it'll be an awesome series, because we will share the information as quick as we have it. They say the maps are going to be out here this month. This month's running out of days. So we will share it as quick as we can. There are conversations with our counterparts at other Kentucky MPOs, KYTC, with NDOT and our Indiana MPOs, because we are not alone. Evansville MPO is probably most notable. Evansville urbanized area lost all territory in Kentucky. Henderson, Kentucky is its own now, just like Mount Washington is its own now. And so Evansville MPO may cease to be a Kentucky MPO, which they have been for as long as I know, as long as I've known it. So it's interesting. It's interesting, but we probably talked for 20, 30 minutes at TTCC, and as soon as we get the maps, we'll put them up there on TTCC. As soon as we get more information, and at some point in time, there will be some decisions and votes for this body to smooth the boundary as we do once a decade. That is the jagged boundary Census Bureau provides. Make it smooth. Say we go out to the county boundary, say we go out to some road. That's the urbanized area boundary as defined by Federal Highway Administration. There'll be some steps along the way that come downstream of the census. And one more thing, maybe even the constitution of the TPC. are those cities large enough, perhaps, to have a seat at this table, right? Are those cities in the 2020 census, not organized area boundary, census, cities, municipal populations, does this body want to add or subtract or do, we'll have those conversations, probably a once a decade conversation we'll do for that post 2020 census.
Andy, is there any, I think I probably know the answer to this. Is there any way to, lack of a better term, fight this? Again, when you talk about the surrounding areas of Louisville decreasing, you know, you can just look at the census and see how much Bullitt County, I mean, that doesn't make sense.
No.
I mean, I'm a numbers guy, and again, and one of the things I stated the other is that for the last few years, we worked really hard to all work together. I mean, if you look at the Safe Streets, you know, Metro taking that on so that we didn't have to pay as much. I mean, I don't know that would happen 10 years ago. I don't know. But again, to me, this pits, I think this leaves a bad taste in people's mouth. And I don't know if there's a way to, we fought the census, you all remember that from 2010 and take our stuff and go home, but.
So the key issue is it kind of boils down to this. The Census Bureau does this process for statistical purposes. FHWA or USDOT is why we care, because our funding is based on that. Census Bureau doesn't care what other federal agencies do with their delineations. And those delineations are done differently for other reasons. I think somebody said USDA was the reason why they wanted to maybe get, work with the fringe areas. But you're right, it's incredibly counterintuitive. Mount Washington is the fastest growing city in Kentucky.
23rd largest in the state.
Yeah, and Mount Washington is at the border of Jefferson County.
Yeah.
Mount Washington is at the border of Jefferson County that has development effectively right up to the border of Jefferson County. And so that is wild. That is wild. And so it's counterintuitive to say not only that Mount Washington is different or is outside the urbanized area boundary now, but that same thing, once we see these maps, like all the way around the fringe, it just kind of, it must have just shrunk all the way
You
in.
can't shrink land.
No.
I mean, maybe I'm wrong.
So
You all are smarter than me. Tell me. I don't think you can. So again, to me, it's, if there's a way to, and again, I think it's a detriment to Metro. And I also think though, that it also pits Mount Washington, separates it from Bullitt County. That doesn't work.
Yeah. So let's say on a positive note, or at least I'll leave on a positive note.
Didn't mean to be
That positive note is this, maybe a silver lining. Now that Mount Washington, LaGrange, are outside of the large urban area, and that there's other portions of the 75 square miles that we lost, those areas are rural now. Not Mount Washington and LaGrange, but all the others are rural. 40 miles are now rural, 33 miles are Mount Washington and LaGrange. Those areas, roads in those areas, presumably are now eligible for other rural funding streams. That's interesting. Maybe it's a silver lining. Also, the states have to ensure that they spend, I think I have this right, so a certain percentage on those sweet spot areas, 5 to 50,000 population urbanized areas. That is Mount Washington, that is LaGrange, that is Charlestown. So KYTC and NDOT must make sure that dollars are still spent in those areas. As the MPO director at KIPTA, I would rather not change and just bring to this table, more dollars can be spread in multiple different ways. Again, what's going to happen? I said I was going to be positive. This is negative. We will get fewer dollars, but the urbanized area boundary, the MPO boundary, is still going to be presumably all 5 counties, and so it's just going to be spread thinner, and that's not great, right? And so we will fight it the best we can. There's no fighting it with the Census Bureau. The Federal Highways Administration perhaps has been caught off guard, it's only slightly. In our Indiana rep, she asked that any questions that come from the MPOs to have them to her in the next couple of weeks, where they're going to have some discussions, I guess, with headquarters. So again, but for the most part, we'll discuss this at the technical committee. As you can tell, there's lots to talk about. It's meaningful, it's important. It determines the funding we get for those, the funding that Nick put on the screen. I'll say 10% of those dollars are at risk. Something like that.
And that's worth fighting for.
No question, no question. I'll quit there. I'm sorry.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Anyone have any questions? Okay, we'll send it back to the committee. All right, anything else to come before the committee? Hearing none, do I hear a motion to adjourn? All in favor? Motion carried.